Okay, and I just want to put that into context based on some of the things that have been said already. Fiona hinted at some recovery in terms of category growth. Guy was very quick to point out this is about a value versus volume proposition. Okay, so it might be good news for some of you, might not be so good for others. And we also heard about a bit more of a balance in terms of cost of production and average prices. That's making no reflection of the longer-term volatility issue that we've got, and perhaps that's already going to emerge as a theme for us in terms of duration of contracts and these sorts of things. The way this is going to work, I'm going to invite the panel to come up. I'm conscious you might not see them, so I'm going to ask them to wave at you as they're coming up. I'll spend a minute or two introducing them, then we're going to have a couple of short presentations and a little pitch from each of our panelists, and then we'll open it up to some broader questions. And our theme very much is around opportunity. So first panelist today is David Swales. David, do you want to give everyone a wave and come and join us at the front? So David's background is in market research. He's been with AHDB MI team for 5 years now. He heads up the MI team responsible for consumer insight. So the knowledge he's got on retail is probably unique and a little bit different to everyone else's. So he can help us through that. Nick White, next. Nick gives a wave. Thank you. Okay, so Nick joins AHDB with his many years' experience in FMCG, working with branded and unbranded dairy, with cider, all sorts of other bits and bobs going on. More recently, he's been working with the AHDB beef and lamb team on some of their marketing issues. He's been with potatoes for about 10 months, something like that, so he's still the newbie, but he's got a lot of experience he can bring to bear for us. Next we've got Nick Morton. Nick, hello Nick. So Nick's background then, Nick joined his family business Guy Morton and Sons back in 1977, and he became the key interface for wholesale and retail within that business. Thereafter, his journey took him through MBM and into QV, becoming head of procurement in 2009. So Nick is currently responsible for 200,000 tonnes of raw product across the 3 QV sites. Next we have Andrew Francis. Welcome, Andrew. So Andrew's senior farm manager at Elevden. Okay, it's a 9,000 hectare affair, and it's benefiting not only the home farm but many other producers as well. He's joined that business after studying at Writtle and working in various farming enterprises in Essex. No carbs before marbs is the only thing I know about Essex, but that's another story. And then finally, Guy Poskitt. You already know Guy. He's from Yorkshire. Delighted you're here, Guy. Okay, so we're going to start the pitches. And first of all, I'm going to invite David just to give us a bit of an overview, okay?
Thank you, Rob. I'm going to really start just to kick things up to give you a little bit of context by talking about consumers for a moment or two. And John, part of your levy funding is actually spent on understanding consumers, and we do a range of research at AHDB Potatoes to understand what's driving consumers' behaviour, what are they buying, and why. So today I'm literally going to share with you a few very headline messages from some of that work. I'm sure this slide won't be a surprise to anyone in the room, but if we start with the fresh sector, we know that over a long period of time, sales of fresh potatoes in retail have been in gradual decline, as this graph shows over the last few years. And particularly what this is driven by, I think, is a whole range of different factors, and it's very difficult to boil it down to one particular thing. But certainly we've spoke a lot today about health, and some of the other presenters have touched on health, and certainly consumers' perception of health is a key thing. Perhaps also versatility and a more varied diet, which consumers have maybe today than they used to have, and also convenience is really key. Probably that long-term decline does vary at points in time. So if you look over the last year, it has levelled off, and I think Fiona mentioned at the beginning, the very latest data shows this levelling off and maybe even slight growth. And I think some of that is actually because of price. So price at the minute is really important to consumers, and we spoke a bit about savvy farmers at the beginning. For me, the key retail trend over the last 4 or 5 years has been very much about savvy shoppers. And what we've seen over the last year or so, the proportion of potatoes sold on some sort of deal has massively increased. So consumers are getting a really good deal when they're buying your products at the moment. And because the deal is so good, that volume growth has more or less leveled off. But I think the longer term picture is probably what we want to focus on today. So I would argue that certainly a very key issue driving this long-term decline in fresh potatoes is around convenience. And a challenge I think we need to overcome is that fresh potatoes aren't really seen as that convenient by consumers. And we might find this difficult to understand, but just the fact of having to wash a potato and peel a potato is seen by consumers to be a really inconvenient thing to do when they've got relatively little time and there's lots of pressures on their time. So we track consumers' views and opinions on potatoes over time. And you can see on this graph the proportion who think potatoes are inconvenient is increasing over time. And we can compare that with our sort of competitor products, rice and pasta. That same trend doesn't happen. So potatoes are seen as more inconvenient than maybe our competitors. And that's really a key challenge we need to overcome. Linked to that, there's a really big key trend which is happening around the amount of time people spend cooking food. And this is cooking and preparing. So if you go back to the 80s, on average, the main meal used to take about an hour to cook and prepare. You come up to last year, and that time had nearly halved to around about half an hour. Jamie Oliver's been one who's really picked up on this, and he's done 30-minute meals, 15-minute meals now. And really, it's about a whole range of factors coming together around us living more busier lives than we used to in the past. And that is really a key thing we need to bear in mind when we're marketing potatoes to the consumer, and really is a really key challenge for the fresh sector in particular. So I would argue in my pitch that actually probably the main opportunities for growth for potatoes are outside of the fresh sector. And I've given you a few examples here. So if we look first at the frozen jacket, which I haven't had one yet, but people rave about them in the office. And certainly you can see here from, basically from a start of more or less zero sales little more than 3 years ago, now around about £40 million of spending goes on. Around about 40 million is spent each year by consumers on buying fresh frozen jacket potatoes. So that's really a phenomenal growth in that product. Similarly, if we look at chilled prepared potatoes, so we've got some sort of chilled mash and some miniature roast potatoes here, we see pretty phenomenal growth in that category. So whereas fresh is quite a mature market, everyone has bought fresh potatoes probably in the last year or so. It's these perhaps more niche markets where we see the phenomenal growth, and I think those are probably some of the key opportunities. And the good news is that by preparing these products and adding some value to them, we do see consumers are willing to pay much more for them. So there's a lot of value to be generated from this type of activity. So this is just an example of rice. Prepared rice products, consumers may save around about they may only take about a sixth of the time to cook, and because of that time saving, consumers are willing to pay about 6 times the cost in order to buy them. And I think the same is true of some of the potato products we've looked at. Probably another opportunity is because these are relatively new markets, we do see that some of these markets are very much dominated by the supermarket sort of private labels. So chilled is an obvious one. There's practically no branded product in that space. You compare that to the frozen market, which perhaps is a bit more established, and there's a more even split. So I think that's probably another key opportunity for the industry. So I'm nearly out of my time, so I'll leave you with a few key conclusions. So to start with, I think I spoke a little bit about the fresh market, which is where the majority of retail sales of potatoes are. So it's a really important market, the fresh market, but it has been in long-term decline. There may be some things we can do to manage that decline, but I don't think fundamentally there's going to be a big growth in fresh potato sales. So as such, I think probably the key opportunities are outside of fresh in some of these processed and added value products, which in particular are seen by consumers as being really convenient, really easy to prepare, and as such they're willing to pay quite a bit more for them. As I've highlighted, there's a lot of competition from other carbohydrates, so people have a much more varied diet today than they did, say, 20, 25 years ago. They're much more likely to eat a range of dishes, curries and pasta dishes, so that competition is really tough. And I think probably in terms of how consumers are feeling over the last few years, certainly it's been all about savvy shoppers and people have been very focused on value. But we are now beginning to see some of that change. So the latest earnings data came out was a bit more positive. So these opportunities to add value may well be realised, and now may be a good time to go out with these ideas. That concludes what I had to say.
Okay, thank you, David. We'll go straight to Nick. Okay. We'll take questions once we've got through everybody's pitch.
You bottom one, Nick.
Yeah. Thank you. So, I haven't turned the clicker before, so let's have a quick go. Okay. So, I've just framed mine very simplistically around two things in terms of opportunities, and I've really taken the opportunity to try and craft it around getting engaged and getting involved. If we're going to work as an industry, if we're going to prosper as an industry, it is about how we collectively do that together. So the start point is One Voice. The inception of One Voice was BP 2013, so as we're galloping towards Harrogate in 2015, it's coming up to its 2-year lifespan. There's a lot of passion and energy in the industry, and that's the biggest thing actually that struck me when I joined this sector, is the passion and energy that everyone I've met kind of portrays. But the point is, it's not always pointing in the right direction. It's not always harnessed in the right direction or the same direction. And One Voice is about doing that. It's about getting everybody collectively to point in one direction and say one thing or a couple of messages consistently. So One Voice is a platform for a common set of messages, and it then gives you the ability to deliver those messages. So it's about delivering the collateral that can get those messages out there. It isn't about coming from AHDB potatoes. It isn't about coming from Bartlett's. It is about the industry coming together and projecting one voice. That's literally it. It's simplicity itself. Truth be told, probably 8-9 months ago, it started to lose some impetus. It started to lose a sense of being, and people were kind of looking around, kind of, well, One Voice, what's happened to that then? What's it all about? Where's it going? And frankly, what are we doing with it? So the activity that's taken place over May, June has really been about kickstarting One Voice again. It has a key role to play. It is about portraying the industry in a very positive way, but it is about harnessing everybody to do that. So the kickstart for that has been the activity we've done through May and June. Fiona showed earlier some of the banners that have gone out there. We've had over 250 banners go out. We've had nearly 500 posters go out. We've had something like 3,000, 4,000 car stickers go out. So the message is getting out there. And that's what we need to do consistently. So it is about a call to action. But in doing that, this call to action has to be selective. If I came to you all the time and said, right, here's another call to action, there'd be a roll of the eyes and a kind of, well, do you know what, I really can't be bothered, I've got a busy life. So the call to action has to be done periodically. And when we do it, it has to mean something and be directed against something very specific. The first instance here was about kickstarting One Voice as an entity and getting out there a very simple message about potatoes, which is, you know what, they're healthy. Because in the vast swathe of things, consumers have kind of lost sight of that. The second call to action, and these are sort of the banners that have gone up, but the second call to action will be about the EU campaign that Fiona referenced earlier. So that's a major piece of funding that we've got in conjunction with Brussels. We'll be working with Board Beer to deliver a consumer-facing campaign. But where you guys come into the equation will be through One Voice. Now, it's work in progress at the moment as to what that means, but it will be about pushing messages out around the EU campaign, because together, collectively, we're going to be a lot more powerful than if we all work in individual silos. And in terms of getting involved with One Voice, there are a number of touch points in which you can do that. But the biggest thing I would ask you of you is, you know, if you've got an observation, if you've got a criticism, feed it in. Tell me, drop me an email, make some contact with me, and tell me what that observation or criticism is. Don't bother trying to sugarcoat it. That's fine. You know, we're all kind of grown up. We can take the criticism, but try to give me something to build on as well. I don't like this, but if, and that would be great. But so one voice is really a vehicle for all of that. My second kind of opportunity, if you like, in terms of getting involved, has again been touched on by one of the earlier speakers. And it is about grow your own potatoes, or more broadly, education. So the thing about growing your own potatoes is it's been around for a long time. It's been around for, well, it's in its second decade now. I think this is its 11th year coming up. When something's been around for a long time, it can be taken for granted. But trust me, grow your own potatoes is doing an extremely valuable job from an education point of view. From its inception, the kind of the genesis of it, if you like, was the realization that a lot of kids, and it still holds true today, a lot of kids just don't know where food comes from. And in this instance, they didn't really realize where potatoes came from. They thought they grew on trees. So that was the catalyst to getting Grow Your Own Potatoes started, and to really get it connecting with primary school children in terms of food. And today we sit on a universe of primary schools, about 15,000, which mean annualized we reach in about 400,000 primary school children. So that's a very powerful kind of platform from which to talk to future consumers about, in this instance, potatoes. The education piece hopefully is self-evident to everyone in this room, but if you're disconnected from food and where it comes from, as you grow into adulthood, you're just not going to make the right choices about what goes on your plate, what food you should eat and why. And so connecting with consumers, the consumers of tomorrow at an early stage, and in this instance we're talking about primary school, is of paramount importance. Now, we're not saying that little Johnny aged 8 is going to walk out of a classroom talking about potatoes have got more potassium than 3 bananas, or potassium are a great source of fibre, or do you know what, they're naturally fat-free. He just won't do that because it's I've had children and it's difficult to get them to brush their teeth at night, let alone kind of remember real specifics. But what he will remember is that potatoes are good for you, and that's all we want him to remember. Potatoes are good for you. And when he goes home and he talks to his parents, do you know what, Mum? I had a really good thing today, learned to grow potatoes. My class is winning the competition. It would be good to have some potatoes on the menu, kind of, or kind of on the meals through the week. It's as simple as that. That's what we want to do. In terms of the engagement and the involvement bit, you will all have primary schools in your area. Are they involved in Grow Your Own? If they're not, can you get in there, talk to the teachers, try to get them involved? If they are involved, how can you connect with them more deeply? Can you organise a farm visit? Could you yourself go in and talk to the school or the classroom involved about what Grow Your Own is all about why potatoes are so good? So you're putting a personal presence, if you like, to something around something the children are doing in class. It's as simple as that. So to sum up, the opportunities for me are twofold. It is all around engagement and involvement. One Voice is a classic platform for that. It will only work if we do it together. It will only work if you give me criticism so I can build on that. And it will only work if you get engaged with it. In terms of Grow Your Own, it's the fundamental block that builds this market going forwards. This is about tomorrow's consumer. So they're toddling off to school in their shorts and whatever. They've got to be learning about potatoes and having an idea that, you know what, it's not just about pasta and rice, which is their new normality. It is about potatoes. Potatoes have been around a long time. We want them to be around for a long time going forwards. Let's get children involved. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Nick, do you want to... Excellent, thank you.
Morning, everybody. What a change in era just in my time. 35,000 growers in 1977, down to just 2,000, just over 2,000 now. That's a large attrition rate. Changing dynamics, everyone's touched on that. Within the potato sector, they're ongoing. Changes to how we shop, more people dining out. the time it takes to prepare and cook fresh raw potatoes becoming a greater problem. I've got 3 in their 20s at home, and it's like getting this gentleman here to get his to clean the teeth. Very difficult. Increasing population, decreasing potato consumption. That has to be a concern to us all. As an industry, we have to focus on how we try to address this, reducing consumption. Something Potato Council, or AHDB, work tirelessly to achieve. Spuds are healthy. We need to continue to get the message across in this health-conscious era. To grow, the topic of the day, we must consume more potatoes. What does this mean to you growers? Price unpredictability, a key driver for a large downward blip within the last 3 years. How many other industries see the price variations we have to contend with, always driven by the rules of supply and demand on the free buy market? 10% oversupply or 10% shortage makes a massive difference to the free buy values available. Price ranges of £50 to £450 over the past 3 years. How can we engineer price stability and sustainability, both necessary to see growth? How can we tailor what we produce to align with what we require as a nation? We are in a free market, and producing the UK's required production isn't a straightforward calculation. You need to throw in factors like anticipated yield, wastage, attrition rate. It's all hugely difficult. How can we budget for the huge yield variations Mother Nature may give us? Official figures tell us that in the last 3 years, 37 to 48 tonnes per hectare, a 30% variation between the two extremes. Some growers in this building today will have seen extreme ranges of 30 to over 60 tonnes a hectare for the same period, I'm sure. And that will be on popular varieties. But we know if we overproduce, we create unsustainability, low prices. And if we underproduce, we see damaging price inflation that effectively erodes sales further and has a knock-on effect for the future. We have to strive to eliminate both. The European factor is always present. The close continent is only 1 day's journey away. We travel further than that within the UK when things get hard to collect potatoes. An opportunity for our continental neighbours to export to UK will always be taken. As a packer, I see it as our role to continue steering our customers to gain a fuller understanding of the true industry costs and what sustainability and stability looks like. 2012-13 prices are no good to anyone and are industry damaging for us all. 2014-15 prices are no good to you producers and are again industry damaging. Some common ground needs to be found. It needs to be found in a timely enough manner, far enough ahead to plan the annual campaigns. By far enough ahead, I'm talking 1 to 2 years on pricing. Demonstrate with competence what it costs to grow, what it costs to pack and deliver, and give all parties a fair and sensible return, and put potatoes on the shelves at a more regular, year-on-year affordable and repeatable price. Some in this room will have contracted for many years. I have randomly taken the last 5 years of one specific supplier I have, where we have both contract and also free buy, from every year from the March-April period. This isn't averages, it's real-world statistics for grade 1 packing potatoes. The free buy price has averaged 174 over that 5-year period. The contract price has averaged 176. The contract price range is £30, the free buy price range is 275. Which one gives us stability? The huge peaks and troughs have been avoided, making for far more consistency and far less emotion by contracting, an average within £2 of each other, but avoiding the massive, damaging 2013 price spike that has affected the consumption as it did. I believe as growers, many of you welcome this safety valve of consistency. For us to deliver this to you, we need to have the same pricing arrangement and stability for the onward marketing of these crops with our customers. We cannot take all the risk. If the price aspirations are below the cost of production, you guys aren't going to sign up, and we are again exposed to a hugely volatile market. I believe there is a willingness to find this stability with many of our key customers who market the core of the UK's potatoes. We've certainly seen recent moves towards this. However, overcapacity within the potato packing arena from the supply side, customer competition on the high street from the retailers, all frustrate the end point we need to try and get to. Can we achieve this? It'd be naive to claim definitely yes, but we surely have to persevere to get price stability so we don't damage the consumption again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Andrew?
Good morning. My responsibility at Elevden is for all things farming, so that equates to about 10,000 acres of our 22,500 acre estate. Within that area we annually crop about 1,200 acres of potatoes, looking to produce around 25,000 tonnes. The split within that is about 50% processing, 30% bakers, and about 20% specialist salad production. We use a range of marketing tools to market those potatoes. So with anything between 1 and 3 year fixed price, fixed volume contracts, down to the annual contracts, be they priced or non-priced, and then also using our salad crop into our own brand, the Garden of Elevden brand, who deal with all of that crop. I guess for us at the moment, things that are high on my agenda in terms of things that we need to address, it's understanding how do we deal with the precautionary approach that seems to be creeping in around all of our legislation and regulation. How do we understand the impact of the Water Framework Directive and what it's going to do to our abstraction licences moving forward? How do we address the skills gap within our business? I still think there's a visible skills gap at all levels, be that at the unskilled grader level, tractor operator level, junior management and technical as well. We also need to understand what marketing opportunities are out there going forward, so how can we be a little bit smarter about what we're doing? And how can we try and introduce a bit of price stability into our business so that we can actually look at long-term investments and long-term return. I think it's very incumbent on us as well to really promote and talk about what we do. We spend a lot of time at Elevden talking to visitors to the estate, be they governmental, NGOs, school children, just really trying to get across the message that actually how do we deal with soil management, water management, how do we look at long-term sustainability, and how do we really promote the sort of the safe, quality, sustainable food that we're trying to produce. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I know you've all met Guy already, but have you got any initial reactions to what you've heard so far that you wanted to share with me? A roving mic here. Just before I start introducing questions, has anything there prompted any thoughts that we ought to be capturing?
I think. Hello. Yeah, it's. I think really my looking at all the presentations, there's only one thing I missed, which was a skills gap, because there is a huge skills gap. Besides that, I think then if you're picking up most of these things, reality is, ladies and gentlemen, should we be growing less potatoes? It was really interesting because Nick said that he's got 3 girls at home. Well, I've got 2 stepsons who are in their 20s, and believe me, when we go out for a meal, the last thing they want to do is eat meat and 2 veg. And we have to be realistic about what market we've got out there. Of course, we're going to chase the market, and of course, we want to drive sales. But I stress to farmers, if you can't sell it, don't grow it. Because we have to be realistic that, first of all, in the potato industry, we're all getting better at what we're doing. The ones that were getting it wrong have disappeared. And secondly, we have got a decline in the fresh market, which will be very, very difficult to overturn. I'm delighted to see that Fiona says that it's starting to improve. If at least we can stop it eroding, we're getting somewhere. The process sector will see growth. We all like convenience. Maybe we could put some convenience into fresh, and that would help drive the sales.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'm just going to check. Have we got a roving mic? Yes, we have. Phil's there with his bib on. Health and safety conscious as ever. That's fantastic. So this is your session now, but it's also our session at AHDB. Guy said something interesting earlier. He said if you want to see change, then talk to us. What we're going to be doing as AHDB is going into a major planning session later on in the summer, and I'm not promising that what you say today gets reflected in the plan, but please be open with us. If there are ideas, if there are better ways of sharing, better ways of moving forward, let's hear them in this session. Okay, we can capture it. It's all been recorded. We can capture some of those and take them into our board meetings and have a more thorough discussion. Where we've got to so far, I think we've actually established there's quite a lot of common ground in here. We've had a piece on market and market opportunities. We've had some of the existing platforms, the things that you might want to share. We've had all sorts of ways of describing volatility. We've had 50 to 450 pounds quoted. We've had a 30 pound to 275 pound differential in the contract versus the free buy system. We've had our conversations about processing and fresh opportunities. We've had capacity issues come up. All of these pointing back to this thing around stability. We've had 1s, 2s, 3s and beyond 3-year contracts cited in the conversation so far. And I think Andrew's quite rightly reminded us that whilst we're concentrating on opportunities, there are some big threats in here as well, whether it's around how we gild the lily in this country when it comes to EU regulation. Forget the precautionary principle. We can magnify some of these things ourselves. Okay, the problem might be closer to home sometimes. And we've got the skills issue on the agenda as well. So it's your session, it's your questions. So what I'm going to do is look for the first hand going up, and Phil's going to chase you down the central aisle. So does anyone want to start us off? Phil, just behind you, right at the back there. Can you just tell us who you are and where you're from, so we've got an understanding, okay?
Okay, yeah. My name's Pete Blaylock. I work for E. Park and Sons Potato Packers. I was very intrigued by Guy's very wide-ranging presentation, and he touched on lots and lots of issues. The one that I thought was the most important one was the imagined future. I'm a very strong believer in you imagine your own future, and probably we all ought to reflect that's where we are now. We did that some 25 years ago. We can produce a lot of potatoes, and probably we ought to reflect that if we produce lots of undifferentiated potatoes, it's rather like producing Austin Allegros in the 1970s and filling them up in the field and not having anybody to buy them. But beyond that, my real question is the interest I have is in sustainability and growth. And everybody seems to want growth, but they also want sustainability. I just would like to ask the question, how do you square that circle?
Okay, just to clarify before we start, is this environmental, economic, or both in terms of sustainability? You knew I'd ask.
Sustainability encompasses everything,
right.
All of it.
Okay.
The question we should probably ask when people complain bitterly that things are going wrong in the big cities, we should really actually point out and ask them, how sustainable are you?
Okay, so right, we've got two things going on here. We've got sustainability in the round versus growth. Are they compromising, or is that something that can be achieved simultaneously? And then we've got level playing field, but much broader than agriculture. I think that's how I've understood it. I'm probably going to go to the guys who grow the crop first of all. Andrew, do you want to have a pop at this one? And I think the challenge here is if we are to be sustainable and grow at the same time, what do we do? Yeah. Can we do it?
Oh, thank you. Very kind. I think sustainability is okay. Sustainability is obviously something that we're challenged with. I think a great point is actually what does sustainability mean? We're asked on a daily basis. To me, sustainability is all about our business being here in 100, 200 years' time, being in a position to be able to meet what our customer wants, be it in terms of crop or actually what stands behind the daily crop production in terms of what we can demonstrate in terms of food safety, etc. I think where I often see it, the challenges that come to us, we're all spending more and more time on the sustainability subject. We're all having to demonstrate that we're sustainable. That's all added cost to our business, and there's no recognition of that, I don't think, further down the food chain. I think our final customer likes it, but won't pay anything more for it. And often, you're probably all in the same position, that when we sit around and have conversations around it, technical, PR, it's great, they all want the story. You go and talk to a commercial guy, are you going to pay us anything more for it? The answer is usually no. So I think for us, really, it's the sustainable piece is really underpinning our marketplace. So where we have visitors to the estate, we need to tell them what we're doing to demonstrate sustainability. How do we deal with it? How do we address it? But actually, the marketing, unfortunately, seems to be a completely separate piece to what we're able to demonstrate on the farm.
Okay, thank you. Nick Morton, then, from you'll have a CSR to fulfil. Is that compromising growth along the same lines? Your corporate and social responsibility and all that stuff you're having to do. Part of this is about demonstrating to the big wide world that we're doing things properly. But for the sort of QV business, how's that challenge handled?
Yeah, it's always a challenge with the, as we call it, the red tape. It doesn't ever get any less, and it's something that will add cost to the business. But I think we're here to talk about the growth and the sustainability, but I think Guy's hit the nail on the head that what we need to aim for the actual market that we've got, not overproduce. We've got increasing costs. We have to try and keep those costs in check. We have to lobby the government so that we don't get bogged down with too much red tape, so that we can actually produce a crop and get it onto the shelves at the right values and try and get remove the volatility out of it. So the gentleman asked about sustainability. I think, yes, we can be sustainable, but we've got to look further out, and I think we've got to look at our costs. We've got to actually learn how to grow better, to reduce the input costs, and I think that's the challenge that we've all got.
Okay, thank you. And Nick White, then, when we first started talking about One Voice, it was this sort of twin-track approach with nutrition on one side and sustainability on the other. Is that still the case? Do you see potential for that, or is this about one big health message?
One Voice for me is very much a consumer-facing vehicle, and in that regard, I would have to say that sustainability isn't really something that's high on the consumer agenda, if at all. So really, if we're going to be pushing positive messages around potatoes, it has to be about health. As David said, it has to be about convenience, and kind of linked in with that is versatility. Sustainability just isn't on consumers' radar at the moment, and I don't think it will be for the foreseeable future. So it is about health and convenience.
Okay, lovely. So just to draw that section to a close then, I think the answer was yes, growth and sustainability, but not necessarily at the same time. There is a compromise and a challenge, and the biggest and best thing we can do is about the face of farming. For me, that was the common piece coming through in that session. Okay. Have we got another question from the floor? It's all very quiet. Nobody? Oh, we've got a gentleman over here. Phil? Hang on, just wait for the microphone, because we can't hear you at the front. Thanks.
Hi there. Simon Hartley from Fred Hartley Estates. Just wondering, I was here a couple of years ago and we were talking about sort of the advertising and the different colour packages for the salads and the fluffy types of potatoes. I was just wondering if there's any data whether that was a success or a failure.
Okay, Nick White, I'll come straight to you on that one. Did you catch the question? This was the signposting work. Did it work? Was it worth doing? Was it a success? It wasn't on your watch, so you can say whatever you like. Okay,
did it work? No, if you're being honest. Did it get traction with retailers? Did we get it in stores? Would you walk in a store now and see it? By and large, no. Has it fed through to some of the packaging in terms of descriptions used? Yes. Has it fed through to recipes that are printed in magazines in terms of that language? Yes. But is it at a very kind of noticeable level when you walk in store? No. And the reason for that is very simple. And it comes back to, actually, because I can always bring it back to One Voice if I try hard enough. It comes back to all the retailers have got slightly different agendas. They're all looking for a USP. They all want to stand apart from each other. The historical big four are scared to death now by what Aldi are doing and Lidl are doing. So they're all looking for that point of difference. What they don't want to do at this point in time is harmonise, and therefore all be seen as doing the same thing, kind of saying the same messages. They're all looking for that slight bit of difference. And that's one of the fundamental reasons why the signposting initiative at retail level just didn't get the traction that it warranted. The thinking behind it was absolutely solid. Because when you walk into a retail store, we all know that it's not the most engaging fixture to shop when you look at fresh produce. And certainly when you look at potatoes, there's no emotional engagement there. So from a consumer point of view, it's grab and go and let's go off somewhere in the supermarket. So the thinking was absolutely solid, but did it land with the retailers? No, it didn't. But it's because they've all got an agenda that they're trying very hard to drive, which is their own kind of self-preservation, if you like.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Perhaps it's a good time to bring in Guy, if I can, because you must be challenged with this all the time, that retailers have different corporate branding strategies, slightly different approaches. From a catalyst for change perspective, then, how do you manage that sort of differentiation?
Well, I think the differentiation within the retailers, first of all, red tractor hat on. I like to see red tractor on the brands because I believe that customers understand what it means to a degree. With 65% recognition of red tractor, it probably don't understand that it's what we understand, but they understand it's British. It's something to do with British farmers. So I like to see red tractor on the packaging. But brand differentiation, it's a marketing tool, and retailers, they're in competition with each other. And how we ever move that competition away, I don't know. My only ask to the retailers is, if you want to keep the value in there, you've got to leave the job as a simple job. If you look at my business, 30 years ago, we washed carrots and put them in a plastic bag. And we do just the same today, but by God have we made a simple job complicated. And if we want to actually reduce our production costs and get better at what we do, we need to strip a lot bit of that red tape out. But going back to brand recognition and differentiation, retailing is a very complicated thing. I've been to see a lot of retailers in this role. Some hate red tractor because some want leaf on. Everybody wants that bit different. I think what as an industry we need to do is make sure that's fine, but make sure we're not paying for it.
Okay, thank you. I'll come to Andrew then next, because there's something relates here, is because you've been talking about skills, probably practical skills as well, but do we have, as a producer base here, the right skills for some of that interaction into retail, do you think?
I think we do. I think probably where we probably sit within the room, there's a really good core skills base here. I think it's about having the confidence to talk to people about what you do. Don't be shy to actually promote it. Open the doors, let people in, show them what's going on. And actually, once they come in, once they see what you're doing, for the most part, they're really astounded at some of the science that goes into crop production, but also a really big focus on food safety. I think the next step down from a skills point of view is really engaging your own team. So we spend quite a lot of time making sure that our team is fully aware of the messages that we're promoting at the highest of levels. So where we're talking to customers, where we're talking to the public about, yes, we do this, we do that, but actually at shop floor level, we need to be sure that the guys are on the same page and actually doing what we're saying, so that there's a common message right the way through the business, from sort of shop floor up. So I think we've got the skills there currently. I think it's very much about engagement. Take the guys out, see the customers, understand the issues, because really at the end of the day, it's the one thing that they do that has the biggest impact on our brand or our sales point or our business. Okay, lovely. And I'll just invite David then, just to finish. Come back to this signposting. That was the original question. Does it work? And whatever, did it work? What is the role here for, you're leading a team of consumer insight people. This is, I suppose it's been on the front of a curve to recognise attitudes, both of consumers, but then how the retailers are reacting. So there's clearly something you can contribute in that area.
I think there's something there, because certainly what we do know is over the last few years, this era of the savvy shopper has come about. And probably you go back 15, 20 years, people would have generally shopped in the same store. they would have generally done a weekly shop, and it would have been quite routine. What we've seen over the last few years is people tend to shop much more frequently. Some people shop in sort of 3 or 4 times a week. People doing much smaller shops in general, and people shopping in a much broader range of stores. And I mean, all the retailers are trying to do things slightly differently. They're trying to sort of stand out from the crowd, and I think that does cause shoppers quite a bit of confusion, actually. We've got examples in other sectors where, certainly in terms of retailing of meat, some stores talk about braising steak, some talk about stewing steak, some have diced meat, and some retailers, chaps get sent down the shop to buy a certain product, they're looking for a braising steak, they don't see it, they don't realise that stewing steak's the same thing. So I think there is something in here around trying to get some of these things to be broadly similar, so at least people are using the same language to avoid confusing consumers. So I think that particular initiative probably was well thought out, and it probably was worth a try, because there is confusion. People don't necessarily know what different types of potatoes are for, but obviously, as Nick says, it maybe failed in the execution. Maybe it's something we need to talk to the retailers about a bit more to understand, okay, what can we do and how can we avoid this confusion creeping in?
Okay, excellent, thank you. Just an observation on this one. It's interesting how well that colour and purpose system has worked in North America. Sobeys, for example, it's part of their main category feature now. It's got added value because they're putting agents into the plastic to reduce greening and all these sorts of things. So there's a little bit extra, but it's $1 a kilogram more in North America. So something in there. Okay, let's go to another question then from the audience, if we've got one. Just down the front here, Phil. Thanks. Okay, thank you.
My name's Chris Jones. I'm employed by AHDB on a Thursday as an independent crop and market reporter. I speak to a lot of growers in Scotland who have been very concerned this year about improving the reliability of potato stocks and whether short-term initiatives can be taken to improve demand. And the second point I make is there are a lot of websites out there, I teach children on a Wednesday, which simply say foods to avoid potatoes. Maybe you should be talking to the National Crime Agency to get these taken down or piggyback on them. Thank you.
Okay, lovely, thank you. So there's 2 things here. One's almost about the sort of speed of delivery of information, which we'll come back to. One's about the perhaps it's a broader piece on reputation potatoes have. I'll go to the policy people, I think, first. Nick White, do you want to kick us off on some of the reputational issues, how we might handle them with not necessarily the crime squad, but other government departments?
So in terms of reputation of potatoes, I think there's the key thing for me is if you look at carbohydrates. So what we're talking about here is carbohydrate essentially. Carbohydrates have become demonized over the last however many years, and it's quite set in the consumer psyche now that carbohydrates are bad for you because you know what, they're fattening. And there's a whole host of stuff that gets lumped into that, bread being one, potatoes another, pasta another. That's quite a deep set belief. It's not true, but it's deep set. So the issue is how do you overturn something like that? You can try and take it head on, and frankly you could spend a lot of time, energy and money trying to do that and not really nudge the needle too much. The other way to think about it is to say, okay, we have got lots of positives though, so what we really need to do is dial up the positives, the stuff that consumers don't know about, and that would actually make them sit up and take a little bit of notice. Which is why we talk about fibre, which is why we talk about potassium, which is why we talk about potatoes being naturally fat-free. Those are the messages that will get us traction. Should we be attacking the carbohydrate thing? There are ways around it, and certainly as part of the EU campaign, one of the things we're looking to do is work with partners, and one of those partners might be Slimming World. If you go to a Slimming World class, and clearly nobody in this audience needs to do that because you're all slim and lithe like myself, but if you were to go to a Slimming World class, you would find that potatoes are actually talked about in a quite positive way, and they feature in a lot of the recipes that Slimming World do. So if someone in Slimming World can entertain potatoes as part of their diet, then the broader mass of consumers can as well. So there are ways of addressing these things, but principally for me it's about dialing up the positives, those positives that aren't really known by consumers. Naturally fat-free, fibre, potassium, and really pushing hard on that, and then trying to have a go at the carbohydrate stuff behind the scenes with partners like Slimming World.
Okay, thank you, Nick. And if I can bring in Guy then, because you had some interesting slides on some challenges for us to say what was healthy. Do you want to expand on that one a little bit more?
Well, it's a balance. I'm a great believer in life. It's all things with limitations. So drinking and potatoes and red meat. If you read the press every day, you'd eat nothing. I think it's just getting a balance in there. What we really don't want to do is start and say that snack potatoes are unhealthy, because let's face it, we're all here today to sell more potatoes, and we've got to make sure, like this gentleman said, that we can answer those questions with a realistic answer, not, oh no, we stop eating snack packs. You know, if you look back to the 40s and 50s, there wasn't the obesity there is today, and people ate lots of potatoes. I think it's just we do things too much to the excess. It's just a balanced diet, really. That's all it is.
Okay, thank you. And just the other part of the question then, if I can bring in David, the role for short-term market interventions was the front end of that piece. Just bear in mind before you answer that last year we were in a 50-week season. We're now in a 53, 54-week season. So there's a sort of a concertina effect going on.
Well, certainly I think probably the direction of agricultural policy over the last 10, 15 years has been to move towards a more sort of market-led system, and I can't see that changing, to be honest. I think increasingly it's about growers understanding what the demand is and growing to that demand. I think that's really challenging for you guys because, John, this last year we did actually see a decline in plantings, yet what drove the sort of big supply situation was you had fantastic yields. So it's really difficult, I think, as growers for you guys to almost align to what your market needs. So I don't know what the answer is on that, but certainly for me, I think it's really important that there are market signals passed back to the growers. We don't want, John, in terms of sustainability, we don't want to be producing things which consumers aren't buying. So, John, I don't think there is much of a place for market intervention within that system, and I think it's really important that the market works well, that you guys get pricing signals passed back to you so you know what's in demand and what isn't.
Okay, thank you. Right, we've got about 4 minutes left if I'm sticking to schedule, which I plan to do. So have we got one final question from you guys? One of our colleagues here, Claire, at the back.
We've talked quite a lot about growing for market, and then we've talked about potatoes being tasty and healthy. How much thought is actually gone into, while the crop's in the ground, for that product to deliver on that commitment of promise, tasty and nutritional? Are we maybe missing something in between?
Oh, so that's how do we get to tasty and nutrition? Right, okay.
Commit to being consistent.
Okay, so I think this is Nick Morton's turn on this one then. So are we linking agronomy in the right way to deliver a promise to our consumers on taste and all of that sort of stuff?
I think that's a key question, and I think some of the varieties we grow, and I think we all know, they aren't the best varieties. So we're relying on the repeat order syndrome. People go and buy potatoes, they take them home, they actually want a pleasant sensation, they want to go back and buy them again. And I think we're all guilty of growing potatoes, and it's commercially driven, that aren't probably the tastiest potatoes. We're not going to go into names, and I think they're the ones that we need to try and reduce, and we need to actually concentrate on growing potatoes that got a good flavour, deliver to the consumer what they want, so they go back and they buy another pack. So I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think there is work to be done on reducing the amount of commercial potatoes that are grown that don't actually have a USP on the plate.
Okay, so Andrew, would that make your world any simpler?
Again, I think it's a really good value point. We do occasionally look at our own potatoes and cook them up. For example, we have the benefit, I suppose, of having a retail outlet, so we can assess customer perception on our potatoes, how they've been received. So we do look at different nutritional programs, particularly around salad potatoes, as to how we ensure the dry matter's right and how we can sort of quantify taste. I think quite often though it's the disjoint at the end, at the consumer's end. They don't really know what to do with it. And with my consumer's hat on, I did have to go and buy some potatoes a couple of months ago. But I went into the supermarket. There were 3 choices for a general white. I didn't know any of the varieties, so maybe I need to get out a bit more. But I didn't recognise them, so I thought, well, I'll take all 3 bags home, give them all a go, and see what they go like. Actually, my experience as a consumer was really poor. So from that, I wouldn't come back and buy potatoes again with any of those varieties on. So I think, I know what varieties we grow, I understand them, but I think sometimes there's just a bit too much diversity in some of the products that's going onto the supermarket shelves at different times of the year, and we're really reliant on that as being the vehicle to a repeat business. So it's absolutely crucial that the taste is right and the product on the shelf.
Okay, so Guy then, in terms of growth plan, then presumably things like tasty, nutritious, seasonal, they're all coming up. But from a producer perspective, are we delivering?
Guys get challenging ones, don't you? I think the problem you've got is realistically farmers, well, Elevden's quite unique, but most of us don't really interact with our consumers. We interact with packers or whatever. But the retailers, the big retailers, the only people that really, really know about what their consumers are looking for. So if you want to get more niche varieties, we've got to have a longer term relationship there with the consumer, with the packer and with the grower, because, how many technologists come on your farm and think growing a crop of potatoes is a 16-week job? It's years and years of planning, in breeding and getting the right land, getting the right equipment, and that's back to my message about longevity in the supply chain. On the nutritional front, I think everybody's really covered it. I'm a great believer that you've got to start at the bottom. The youngsters of today are our future. And if we want to educate them in what's good for you, we've got to start at the bottom. We've got to get more into schools. We've got to involve with the health service. I think Open Farm Sunday is a really, really good thing. Gets people on farms and understands what they're growing, because how many people don't actually understand where the food comes from? So that's a big plus for me. But the biggest message from me is longevity in the supply chain. Without longevity, you can't take these projects forward.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we're out of time. I'm just going to wrap up. I think it is fair to say with all panel sessions, you end up with more questions at the end than you had when you started. But just to rattle through some of the things we've sort of scratched the surface, tip of an iceberg stuff today, but it gives us some good food for thought. We've had this sort of sustainability versus growth, whether it's a compromise or a synergy. I don't think we've quite got an answer, but it's affecting all of us from producers, supply chain, into retail, all these sorts of things as well. We've had a little rattle around some of the MI issues, speed of delivery, whether there should be interventions, those sorts of things, whether things like consumer signposting work. In theory, absolutely. In practice, it's this appreciation of retail differentiation that appears to prevail. We've come up with some good stuff around taste, around health, around seasonality. We have acknowledged, whether this is through accident or design, we have confused consumers. We've had a little poke into the world of how many varieties we've got and whether they perform effectively, and so on. And there are some global experiences of where things seem to work quite well. It's about voice. We call it One Voice. You might call it Leaf, Face, Red Tractor, whatever. They're out there as opportunities for us all to engage with. We need to coordinate perhaps a bit better. I think Nick made a very good point that we can create, and I think I raised this last year, we could create a cacophony that nobody understands if we want to. There's a bit of sort of order required in here, and that order only comes from long-termism, whether it's through extended, more certain contracts, better relationships, continuous working up and down the supply chain. So thank you all for your questions. They were the right ones to stimulate a conversation. And thank you to Nick, David, Andrew, and Guy. Okay, so thank you, folks. Well done. Okay.